As I say, it's my pleasure to be passing the baton to both Leanne and Nicola as the incoming co-chairs, and we'll explore a little bit more today, in fact, how that sort of top sharing can work. Leanne's background's in senior leadership across local government and not-for-profits, and has had 4 years on the North East Catchment Management Authority and is now on the board of North East Water, and recently graduated with a Master of Laws Enterprise Governance from Bond Uni, and became an accredited mediator this year, which is great. And she's also chairing the Victorian Local Governance Association's Governance and Risk Committee, and is a fellow of the Golden Murray Leadership Program and the Rural Women's Leadership Program. So fabulous to be passing the baton to Leanne. And also Nicola. And Nicola is a non-exec director on Vic Water, as well as being deputy chair of South Gippsland Water. And when she's not focused on all things water, she spends time working on social purpose campaigns, bringing her experience as a research and marketing expert to issues such as assisted dying legislative changes, criminal justice reform, and youth mental health. And as Nicola says, as a woman in her 60s, she's also had a few firsts. She was the first woman to sit on the board of the Clemenger Group, one of Australia's largest advertising and comms companies, which she has described as 1950s Mad Men meets Strong Woman. And she's definitely a strong woman, and we're thrilled that she and Leanne will be co-chairing going forward. She was also the first elected president of the Industry Association for Research Organisations. So terrific leadership for the next chapter of the Women in Water Director Network Committee. So over the last few years, we've held a number of conversations through the Women in Water Director Network, conversations that matter. And in preparing for today's session about top sharing, we recognised that a lot of the intersectionality that we discussed, particularly in last year's session with Dr. Nikki Vincent, the inaugural Gender Equality Commissioner, that a lot of those matters are topics also that have been picked up earlier this year by the Victorian Women's Trust, which one of our speakers today is the chair of. So Alana Johnson is the chair of the Victorian Women's Trust, and I'll run through in a moment more fully the bios of our speakers today. And the issues that matter, the 8 issues that matter that were identified earlier this year by the Victorian Women's Trust do touch on a lot of the matters that we've had conversations around and brought voice to through our WWDN events. So, for example, the first of the 8 issues being action on climate change. In July 2020, we ran an event called Women, Wisdom and Water, and bringing learnings from Aboriginal women, including insights around action to benefit the climate change front and benefit the environment. And similarly, the second issue identified as an issue that matters, it being a First Nations voice to be enshrined in the Constitution, that was also touched on in that session about women, wisdom and water. The third issue identified by the Victorian Women's Trust was wage justice for women. And in our session last year, Dr. Nikki Vincent talked about that. The fourth issue identified by the Women's Trust was to stop men's violence. We've indirectly, in part, tried to bring some energy around that indirectly, particularly in terms of initiatives that uplift women overall, because it's actually it's violence against women, including family violence and workplace sexual harassment. being driven by gender inequality and attitudes and behaviours and stereotypes that support that. So indirectly, we've been assisting that, and also through a lot of the water corporations and CMA's gender equality action plans. The family violence policies have been assisting on that front as well. The fifth issue, affordable childcare for all families. I was reflecting back the session just before the Vic Water Conference this year, where we heard from Laura Fluck in the context of talking about sticky floors and glass ceilings, and the story that Laura shared about having to juggle a senior leader role in the water sector with caring for kids and driving through a drive-through with her kids in the back seat. She thought she was on mute, but actually the whole meeting heard her negotiating the purchase of soft serve ice creams. And I think we all really connected and felt for that situation. The sixth issue, being affordable housing for older women, is something that as yet we've not really touched on. And similarly, the seventh issue being ending treatment of asylum seekers. That's not areas that we've directly touched on. The eighth area, though, integrity and accountability, we touched on that in the session in March of last year about directors of the future, including the discussion that John Bradley, or the voice that John Bradley brought into that conversation about the criticality of integrity oversight skills in the water sector, including in terms of capital programs. So it's been great actually looking through and reflecting on how many of our topics through the Women in Water Director Network sessions we've already held have had impact and on the issues that matter. And there's more to come. And actually at the end of today's session, we'll have a little survey pop up, and we'd be really grateful if you could provide any feedback, including topics that you might like to see us cover in future sessions as well. So today's fireside chat, we are thrilled to have chatting with us Alana Johnson AM. So Alana is widely recognised for her pioneering work on a range of matters, including women's issues and really pioneering and making a difference for women. So she's been recognised for her work in rural development and gender equality, appointed a member of the Order of Australia for her services to women, and inducted onto the Victorian Honour Roll of Women. And her many and varied roles and talents and contributions are too long to list in detail, but include immediate past chair of the Victorian Catchment Management Council. She's a current director of Goulburn Murray Water, founding member of Australian Women in Agriculture, current chair of the Victorian Women's Trust, and member of the inaugural Ministerial Council for Women's Equality. Alana is also a founding member and past president of the acclaimed democracy movement Voices for Indi. So we're thrilled to have Alana in today's fireside chat and in conversation with Dr. Serena Liu. So Serena is the co-chief executive officer of the Victorian Environmental Water Holder, and she job shares the role with Beth Ashworth. Prior to working there, she was a senior public servant at DELP for over 10 years. She has a PhD in freshwater ecology. She's been a lecturer of sustainability at Swinburne Uni, an independent consultant to government and private business. Serena is a fellow and past board member of the Peter Callan Trust as well. So we are thrilled to have such talented women engaging in such an important conversation today about top sharing. Very briefly, before I hand to them, some housekeeping. Be great if you could keep the cameras on. At the end of the fireside chat, Alana and Serena are happy to take questions. At the end of the session, Leanne Mulcahy, so one of our incoming co-chairs, will then wrap up with some takeaways, and we'll conclude with a really short pop-up survey, which, as I mentioned, would be grateful if you could complete. And today's event is being recorded. So it's my pleasure now to hand to Alana and Serena. Over to you.
Terrific, Tanya. Great to be here, isn't it, Serena?
Yeah, absolutely. A real pleasure.
I must admit, I hope you can hear me clearly up here. I actually am literally by the fireside, and the rain is absolutely pouring down here. So noisy on the iron roof that that's reverberating in my ears. So I'm coming today from Tungarong country near Benalla in northeast Victoria. Thank you, Karen, for that lovely welcome. And I would like to acknowledge the First Nations people of the land where I'm coming from, but also as a woman in the water sector to acknowledge my role in being a custodian of our land and waterways and the responsibility that carries. Where are you coming to us from, Serena?
I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung. I live near Dandenong Creek in Melbourne, and I'd also like to pay my respects to those traditional custodians of the land that I'm calling in from. Yeah, it is really important that we recognise that enduring connection that they have to our land and waterways.
Yeah. So Serena and I had been speaking about how we would do our fireside chat, even though we're hundreds of kilometres apart. And so hopefully we can get chatty. But what we thought we would do to start with is I would start and sort of set the scene a bit and give a bit of a history of like women in the workplace over time and the gains we've made. And then Serena will take over and talk a little bit about the changes that women are making happen in the workplace today. And then we'll lead off from that to some chatting together and then hopefully some questions from the audience. All good to go, Serena?
Yep.
Yep.
After you.
Okay, thank you. Well, you know, it's such a delight to be part of this organisation because there's constant talk around now as to like, why do we have women's organisations and surely we still don't need them? And we could have a whole conversation about that. But one of the things that I really love about our network and what we're doing is that we've set one of our purposes that it's about women thriving and succeeding in the workplace. And, you know, we have still got work to do for that to be the reality for a lot of women. So it's that next step stuff that is so important that we mustn't lose sight of. So I'm going to attempt very boldly to give a sort of like potted overview of the feminist journey in the last 100 years in 3 minutes. And then hopefully, you know, perhaps do a little bit of challenging about where we are at today as I hand over to Serena. So let's just do the potted journey to start with. You know, I don't need to tell you that women have always been workers and women have always earned income. And, you know, we know in the rural sector, women often made farms financially sustainable by their work. And so that acknowledgement that women have always worked and women have always contributed had not always been there for us. The sense of invisibility of women, particularly women in the rural sector, the invisible farmer, you know, we were relegated to being housewives for so long with little recognition, even in our Australian census, of the work that women did, because as soon as you ticked housewife, there was no questions about how many hours you worked or how much money you brought into the business or anything like that. So that invisibility was really our first big sort of achievement, the value of women's work. Then we moved on, I think, to the 1970s, where we really started to focus on women and opportunity, saying that women should have the same opportunities as men. And we saw a lot of reform work done by the government and policies put in place so that it gave women opportunities across the broad sector of workplaces to be able to work there. You know, no longer were they told they had to stay home if they were a teacher because they got married or had a baby, all that stuff that was part of our my mother's generation, thank goodness that all came to an end. I think as opportunity opened up for us, then we started to address issues of equality. And a lot of us have probably been involved in that journey as we've tried to address the issues of safety of women in the workplace, the pay gap, a whole lot of things, the discrimination, the equality issue is not done with, as we all know. And Tanya has just outlined some of the issues that are still confronting women in the workplace. But, we're making headway there. And as I said, I'm just so pleased because we're actually in a place now, after all these decades of work and the work of all those women who've gone before us, to be able to ask the question now, what should a workplace look like for a woman to thrive and succeed? I mean, that is a fundamental revolution that we can actually ask that question now that we're in a place to. And, after COVID, I think that the workforce value of women has like it's never been before. Every time you hear the news, they talk about creating opportunities for more women to get back into the workforce. So our economic value to the to the economy has really opened a lot of doors for us. And, as we have this conversation now, even about things like affordable childcare, people have been pushing that for decades, but it's never taken traction until now. There's an economic bottom line for it, that we need to make childcare affordable because we need these women back in the workforce because of the economic contribution they make. So we're in a fairly unique place right at the moment where women's work is so highly valued, we mustn't miss this opportunity. So, but let's step back a little bit and recognise that in reality, all the institutions in our modern society, whether they be, the banking sector or the government sector or parliament, the public service, corporate companies, the church, whatever, they've all been set up historically by men to suit men. And as we've got the opportunity as women to actually claim a place in those institutions, it's come with some expectations and restrictions. Basically, it says, all right, we'll let you women in, but you actually got to fit. You've got to fit in how the institution works now. We've had to adopt a whole lot of ways of working that fit those institutions historically, or we wouldn't have got anywhere. We certainly wouldn't have even got promoted. And, we know all those pressures. It's even down to what sort of clothes you're meant to wear in particular workplaces. Yeah, it's pretty amazing to think that until recent decades, women weren't allowed to be pilots or police or frontline military. They weren't allowed to play AFL football. They weren't acceptable as politicians until only the middle of last century, let alone to be the boss or the CEO of an organisation. So women have really worked hard to create a place for themselves in all of those workplaces. And part of that has been to get a foot in the door, what you've had to give up and what you've had to do. And I reckon we've learned a couple of really important lessons that we should be all aware of today. Firstly, that no one was ever going to open the door for women. As we know, for women to be pilots or be able to play AFL football, it would never have changed if it hadn't been for women. Women have actually had to be the change makers. They've had to be, no one was ever going to do it for us. And the government was never going to create policies without us being the push behind the scene. So I think that we have to accept that all changes that benefit women have to be generated by women, and we all have to support those changes, or they just don't happen in reality. The other thing is what now is sort of being called the patriarchal bargain, and Google it. It's a fascinating sort of phenomena, and it comes from other cultures, but it's just as applicable to what happens here. And the patriarchal bargain is sort of this notion that institutions, even like marriage in some cultures, have been set up by men and suit men. And for women, in order to be able to claim a place in some of the institutions that we have, they've had to sort of like agree to a bargain that they'll toe the line, that they'll operate within the organisation the way you're required to operate, and that you will sort of abide by the boys' rules, the ground rules, the rules of the game that were there before you came. And I think a really good demonstration of this is women in political parties. We all know, because they tell us now, the sort of compromises they've had to make in the past to be able to be acceptable and successful in their political parties. And they've actually had to accept the rules of the game that they might not necessarily agree with or want to adhere to, but that was the only pathway to success. But the really wonderful thing about where we're at now is that we know from evidence that when you get enough numbers of women in any workplace, you actually start to change the culture. And we know from being women on boards that you get enough women around the board table and you actually can change the culture of a whole organisation. So the numbers game is really important, and we're slowly creeping up to get those critical numbers of women in any workplace to actually affect the culture. Some people say that, and this is a really interesting, you might not agree with it, but that workplaces can be aligned to a metaphor from the Bible. And there's this story in the Bible called Jacob's Ladder and Sarah's Circle, and it's an expectation that men will get on the bottom rung of the ladder, and success in their lives is to climb the ladder. And they climb the ladder and being expected to climb the ladder over everybody ahead of them, to even push some off. And it's the man's world of like having to be seen to be successful and even perhaps, more than assertive, even aggressive, to actually rise and succeed. And in the story in the Bible, there is a notion called Sarah's Circle, which says that like women have a preferred way of working that is much more collaborative and collegiate. And they see, because the Bible story is about the fact that, safety for women has been safety in numbers and cooperating together. And so women have learned culturally over time that that's the way to actually make things happen. And I think it's really interesting that I think that's playing out in our parliament right in front of our eyes at the moment, as we see the new ways that particularly the women crossbenchers are deciding and choosing how to work in parliament, that they're actually not going to do politics the same way as they've been told it needs to be done. And there's this sort of new finding a way of a collaborative way of working in parliament that I just think is such an exciting sort of revolution and opening up really interesting things to us. So I think we need to be alert to the fact that as we get chances in the workplace to be more, for workplaces to be more available to women and for success to be more available to women throughout the hierarchy of work institutions, that the structures are there that have been man-made and that they're always going to have some restrictions. And I think that the sort of feminist lens is that what is man-made can be unmade and can be remade. And so I suppose my challenge to us in the water industry and my lead into Serena is that, as women in the water industry, perhaps we need to be asking the question in our workplaces, what is thriving for women in our workplace? What is succeeding for women in our workplace? What does that workplace look like? And then what needs to happen to create that workplace so that women actually become the proactive change makers, not the people that fit in it? So I'm going to leave you with the challenge of how we as leaders can co-create workplaces that all women can survive, thrive, and succeed in. And what do we need to do to make that happen? So Serena's an example of that in my mind. She's actually taken on a structural issue in a workplace. She's asked the question, what could this workplace look like for women to thrive and succeed? And she's actually achieved structural change. So, Serena, I'm so excited to hear your story because you're such an example of what I'm talking about.
Thanks, Alana. And thanks for that reflection on where we've come from. I think that is really important. And one of those structures that you talked about that's been man-made is the 5-day working week. And I guess historically, when men were more in the workplace and women were at home, they go to work maybe long 5 days a week and be with the family on the weekends. And that's exactly one of those things that I think we need to break down and really look at, do we need to be working that 5-day working week? And that's certainly an element around, is that something that we can break down to help women and men thrive and succeed? Because we know that flexibility, it's a really great tool to enable retention of talent and to bring about mentally healthy workplaces for women and for men. And so this conversation has come about as well because at the Directors Development Day back in May, there was a session there on new ways of working, which looked at flexibility, which was just a fantastic conversation to have, particularly coming out of COVID. We'd all been working remotely and there was a big focus on remote working, hybrid ways of working and flexibility. And I asked a question in that session, so how can boards support managing directors and CEOs to work flexibly? And at this event, like most good ideas, the idea for this event came about from a conversation. And that conversation was between me and Tanya. And I just want to thank Tanya for making that conversation and that idea into a reality and why we're all here today. So thanks, Tanya. And I think it's an important discussion. Because when we sit around boardrooms discussing flexibility, how much do we actually consider it for the MD and CEOs? You know, these are busy, stressful roles, and a lot's asked from executives. Most work long days, weekends, and their focus is on supporting their staff and creating flexible arrangements for their staff, but very rarely for themselves. So today I'm going to talk about one specific flexible work arrangement, job sharing. And when job sharing is done at executive level, it can be called top sharing. And top sharing really brings a lot of flexibility, opportunity, and I believe strengthened decision making, which is why the Victorian Environmental Water Holder appointed co-CEOs, myself and Beth Ashworth. We've both got young kids. My husband's a firefighter. He's also in the Air Force Reserve, so he goes away a lot. I single parent a lot. So working part-time, it really works for me and for my family. So working a busy executive role 5 days a week, it's not something I would have contemplated if it couldn't be on a part-time basis. So Beth and I both work 3 days a week. I work Monday to Wednesday. She works Wednesday to Fridays. We have an overlap day of Wednesdays when we're both in the office. And we make it work by both being across everything. We have to make a decision about any matter that might come up on a given day, but we do take the lead on different functions, which means we get more into the detail about some parts of the business than others. Because when you work 3 days a week, of course, you've got to find those efficiencies and you can't be in the detail of everything. And this top sharing arrangement's been happening at the Victorian Environmental Water Holder for 5 years now. I've had 3 job share partners in that time. Beth Ashworth took her first maternity leave and I job shared with Trent Wallace, who was with the Corangamite CMA. Beth came back from maternity leave, we job shared. She then went on her second lot of maternity leave. She's had a second child and I job shared with Paul O'Leigh, and now she's back again and it's back to being Beth and I. So we've shown across that 5 years that job sharing can be done successfully in senior roles. And it's a solution to work-life balance for executives. I had a look at the statistics. There's only 5% of Victorian public sector executives who work part-time. And the very few who do work part-time are generally working 4 days a week and honestly trying to cram a 5-day-a-week busy role into 4 days. One of my colleagues in DELP, who is in that arrangement, she works 4 days. She has 2 young children like myself. I said, oh, how's it going? And she's like, oh, I am just holding things together at work and home life is a mess. And I think that's it. She was a exceptional woman, had all that capability to be an executive role, but also wanted to be there for her young family. But really, it's not like she had 20% less workload from working 4 days a week. So by encouraging part-time executives, I think we can maintain that female talent better. I wonder how many women don't go for those roles because they think, oh, it's too busy, it's too stressful, because we do know women still are taking the majority of the domestic burden. I know I'm a CEO and I'm still making all the lunches, majority of the washing, all that stuff. I live in a very modern marriage, but a lot of it still by default rests with women to have that kind of emotional workload as well for the household. So having said that, though, top sharing, it doesn't have to be just for part-timers. It can, and certainly not just for women returning from maternity leave. As I said, 2 of my 3 job share partners have been men. And I think a lot of people want to work flexibly these days to fit in with modern life. And job sharing can be for multiple reasons. You might be studying part-time as well. Easing into retirement is another great way for people to be helping coach the next generation of executives along and doing that in a job share arrangement, or pursuing hobbies, or a range of other reasons and other interests that you want to pursue. So I just want to outline now, why would you do it? What are the benefits to individuals, the organizations that they work for, and broader society? So for the individual, I think the personal well-being benefits are clear. You can have the flexibility to meet your personal commitments while still having a satisfying career. I've noticed it with a job share. I'm able to mentally switch off on my days off. I know someone else is at the helm, driving the organization and making those fantastic decisions. And that leads to a proper recharge on my days off, and the ability to return to work fresh and energized. I don't get the Wednesday hump day. I don't get the Friday fades. I am on every hour of the 3 days I work because I've had those 4 days off with my family, getting all my chores done. So I just focus on my 3 days. And job sharing also provides opportunities for career progression that might not be available for a strictly part-time role. I think we see job sharing done by project managers more commonly than senior executive roles with teams reporting to that person. So by job sharing executive roles, you can take on more senior roles, bigger projects, while still maintaining that work-life balance. And I found a really great personal benefit. One of the things that I really like to highlight is that peer support. It's often said that leadership is lonely. Well, that's not the case in a job share. I love having Beth to use as a sounding board. It's really comforting, and it's good for business decision making for 2 people to be talking through the strategic ideas. And also, by having a top share, an organization is really role modeling flexible work arrangements right from the top. It makes staff more comfortable to approach their managers and ask for flexible work arrangements when they can see that being role modeled within the executive team. And I certainly had staff at The View, and particularly younger female staff, saying, oh, I love working for an organization where there's these 2 strong women at the top. And it really shows them what can be achieved. And as you know from sitting on boards, it's well known that collective decision making is stronger than when decisions are made by an individual. Beth and I deliberately set aside time on a Wednesday, we call it CEO strategy time, to talk through the big meaty issues, the crises, how we're going to deal with risks. And the rigor of that decision making is improved because both of us contribute our perspectives based on our individual skills, our work styles, our experience, our stakeholder networks, and we're bouncing ideas off each other all the time. And importantly, we're learning from each other. It's really important in a job share to put your ego aside, focus on the organizational outcomes, and work together for that best outcome. And so that can lead to these productivity increases. Each CEO is very focused and energized on their limited time. They don't leave things undone for their counterpart. And we hold each other to account. and that drives performance. We're really conscious of representing each other. So as an example of that, Beth and I have a shared email address, so we can see everything that comes in and everything that goes out. So just think about that for a moment. How much extra care would you put into the emails that you write if you knew that somebody else is going to read all of them and that their name is on the signature block alongside yours? So, you know, we both put in that bit of extra effort, and I think that's the benefit of shared accountability, because you know you're representing somebody else, so you take that extra time and care. Another benefit to the organisation is that when one of us is on annual leave or we're on a training course, the other person's still there providing that continuity to the team 3 days a week. But importantly, there's still the opportunity for one of our executive managers to step up into the role and act in the role for the other 3 days, jointly with the CEO who's still around. And our executive managers have really learnt a lot from doing that and being in that position, but still having the support of the CEO who's there. And for an organisation, I think the benefit, you know, job sharing is really a significant enabler of diversity and inclusion, particularly in relation to women. I also think there's broader benefits for the society as a whole, like greater contribution to the community through volunteer work or caring for others. Certainly carer responsibilities is a key reason to be part-time. And by spending less time at work, then more time is freed up for broader societal involvement. You know, for me, that's volunteering at my kids' school. It's the work at the Peter Cullen Trust. So I'm able to contribute in a volunteer capacity because I've got that extra time in my week to do so. And so job sharing can also contribute to that a reduction in stress and anxiety, having time to exercise more, spend time with friends and family, connect to nature. These things are all beneficial to health and well-being that might have flow-on effects and less pressures to the healthcare system. And perhaps one of the most important benefits for society is just that reduction in the female brain drain that we see. Many part-time workers are females and they get stuck in the lower to midpoint in their career. So job sharing can be used as part of equal opportunity policies in order to attract and retain experienced and professional female employees. And so lastly, I just want to touch on the important role of decision makers. That's all of you board members who are here today. You're the ones who make up the interview panels to appoint executives, the MDs and the CEOs. I feel like you're the ones who need to be brave and innovative in job designs. I've been knocked back 3 times when I applied for roles and proposed for job share. I got lots of excuses of why it would be too hard to make it work. And I don't really see how that's going to work, was what I got. I am pretty stubborn and pretty driven. And so I just kept going. I had a faith in the model and thought it could work. And it took an innovative chair at the Victorian Environmental Water Holder, Dennis Flett, I think he might be here today, to say, oh, I've seen co-coaching work in footy. We'll make it work. And so it's just having that really positive, let's give it a go attitude that enabled the Victorian Environmental Water Holder to put this model in place. So I think we should ask ourselves, instead of saying, you know, why can't we do it? It's too hard, there are risks. You need to think, well, how can we do it? How can a top share work? Because the benefits are clear. You've just got to give it a go. Thanks, Alana. Oh, you're just on mute, Alana.
3 years in and I'm still doing that.
We've all done it.
Oh, that was very interesting, Serena, and some very interesting challenges for all of us to take on. I've got a couple of questions for you, though.
Sure.
So, I mean, you're really an example of what I talked about in trying to change the structural arrangements of a workplace. So tell me, did you get sort of pushback from people in the workplace who have a particular expectation of what the boss should be like and how the boss should operate? And, you know, sort of like, what do you do about the pushback?
Sure. And I think that was the case when I'd been knocked back, because I think there is that expectation that the boss will be there all the time. I think that's the number one thing, that you have a boss who makes the captain's calls and is there. And so that's one of the risks, I think, that you need to talk through, or that the boards would need to think through, that it's just a perception. It's not real. And actually, by having two people at the top, you reduce that captain's call. At the Victorian Environment Water Holder, our executive managers have reflected that by having two people, and so when we're in executive team meetings and Beth and I bouncing ideas off each other, it ends up that we all collectively work like a think tank, rather than the boss with the executive saying, well, this is what I think I should be. If I'm saying to Beth, oh, this is what I think, what do you think? It kind of then means the executive managers also chip in with what they think, and you get this more collaborative, constructive culture.
Yeah, it's that cultural change, isn't it? Attitudinal change that
absolutely
got to work towards.
Yeah.
The other thing, before I hand over the floor to you, if you've got any questions for me, is that I'm just interested in how you might suggest people with your experience now put together an approach. Like, what sort of proposal can you take to a workplace that's never even thought of this?
Sure.
Is there help somewhere? Is there a template? Is there something people can source that can give them a bit of an outline of all those things you've just spoken about the benefits?
Yeah. So in regards to the benefits, I've got an article that I wrote on LinkedIn. They're up there. It's similar around those sort of individual, organizational, societal benefits, as well as some top tips on how to functionally make it happen. I think that when you are applying for a role, it isn't actually clear cut if you should apply on your own or as a duo if you found someone else. I've seen both things happen. I had advice from the View Chair: don't hitch your horse to one cart. So give the interview panel the flexibility to match you with somebody else who's applied for the job based on their skills and experience. I've also read about examples in the corporate sector where two women worked really well together, and they were clear, we're a package deal. You know, we work together, they've applied together, and they're appointed into a CEO role in the corporate sector. So I think both can work, but it's always a good idea, of course, to call up the recruiters and see if they are looking for a particular model or not.
Yeah.
So
any general comments from you, Serena, or questions that you would like to ask me?
I would, you've obviously been in positions on boards for a long time, Alana. I was wondering if you've got any advice for the people listening in today who will be on interview panels of how they should consider flexibility or innovative job design when they're appointing senior executives.
Well, I think that goes back to my original point, Serena, where I think there's probably a piece of work that we're missing. And that's what excites me so much about how we've set the purpose of this network, because the piece of work that's missing, we're all on board, men and women, to ask the question in our workplaces now, how can we get more women into the upper management levels? But we actually haven't asked that. So we're doing work in that place. We're going out, we're looking for women, we're tapping women on the shoulders. We're really working hard to create that change in our workplaces. But the question we haven't asked yet in most workplaces is, and it alludes to the end of your talk just then, is to ask the question, what is thriving in the workplace for a woman? What is success in the workplace for a woman? So perhaps we need to go to the women and ask them that, because it's only when we have the answer to that can we then say, how can we make this happen? Because at the moment, I'm not quite sure we can answer it, that we don't know quite what we want to make happen. And that answer lies with women. So and men too, because to thrive and succeed in the workplace, there's going to be a lot of things that we have in common. Yeah. But while we're focused on asking this question for women, what is it that would make you thrive better in the workplace? What is it that success looks like in your career journey? And I think we need to do that work in our own workplaces so that we're in a position on our boards to say, okay, how can we make this happen?
Mm. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Women, as you mentioned, tend to be empathetic leaders, and they want to lead and work for organisations who have constructive cultures. So that helps them to thrive and succeed. And I think flexibility is a really big part of that. And both women and men need lots of different tools in the toolkit to choose from. Job sharing is just one of them, to make life work for them and their families and the organisations that they work for.
Yeah, I agree. And, like most things, including, how we do politics in our country, the ordinary everyday people need to have a voice. And so we need to go to women, ordinary everyday women who are living the sort of lives that we're talking about, with all those pressures on them of caring for the younger generation, caring for the older generation, wanting to be involved in their communities. We actually need to go and give those women a voice so that we get a picture of what this new work life looks like. And then we can strategize about how we do the structural change that needs to happen to make that occur.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm conscious of the time. Tanya, did you want to ask any questions from the floor from people who might be here?
That'd be great. Thank you, Serena and Alana. Now, I'm hoping Tara is able to coordinate the tech for us at this point. So I can't actually see anyone else. And then on my thing, there aren't any questions coming through on the chat. So we might, given there's lots of people on this call, and we haven't got anything come through on the chat, I might just, I can see a hand from Kate. Over to you, Kate. And otherwise, pop things in the chat or get ready to click up a hand. Looks like you'll appear higher up on the screen if you put up a hand. Thank you. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Tanya. Thanks, Serena and Alana. It's been a really interesting session, and I was listening along and thinking, I can kind of feel both parts of the history of where we've come from, where we are now. And Serena, I absolutely agree with you on co-working. I had two people who worked for me who job shared, and their names were Kath and Ange, and they actually became known as Kathange, as Tanya would well know. And they went along the world as a package, and they were immensely successful. And I from my perspective, they were a perfect model on how it can work when everyone's interested in making it work. But my question is kind of a deeper and probably a more emotive one, which is, you talked about that emotional burden that women often carry, even when they have strong partners around them who are equally happy to lean in and carry some of that. But sometimes it just doesn't work out that way. Do you think there's still a risk that women hold themselves back because they feel that they can't get past that emotional burden, or that when they push themselves too far, they feel that they're burning the candle at both ends, and then they become that terrible parent, terrible partner, and not performing in the job as well? So do you think there's a role for organisations in asking a question about what would it take for you to level up? What could we do that would make you feel confident about levelling up? Because I sort of feel as though we are sometimes our own worst enemies, and we talk ourselves into a position of saying, I just can't do it all right now.
Oh, look, absolutely, Kate. I think I've heard that as women want to, or can women do it all? Yes, but not at the same time, was once I was told that from a mentor. And I didn't want to buy into that, because I thought, well, I do want to do it all at the same time. But for me to do that, it means I've got to be part-time, a part-time executive. But there weren't very many role models of that. And I think that's why, the example at The View is really important to show women that it can be done. And then the more that we talk about that, the more we have discussions like this, then women will be thinking, I just can't do it all. I can't have a busy 5-day-a-week executive role. Might stop and think, but I could do it 3 days a week. Is that even possible? And we're trying to show, well, yes, it is possible. And so we need to be really open and letting people know that this is a way to have work-life balance at those executive levels. And similarly, Alana, you talked about, men really trying to climb that corporate ladder. I do stop and think sometimes is perhaps that next step in the feminist movement, trying to get more men off the corporate ladder, getting them to go part-time, doing more of the home load. But I think as a society, that's really looked down upon. I know that the men who have stayed at home and taken on more of that burden have really copped it from their male friends or society, think, oh, you're a stay-at-home dad, or oh, you work part-time to look after the kids. And we just don't seem to be there for society in supporting our men to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm just going to add to that, Serena. Yeah, I think back in the 80s and 90s, women were sold this sort of notion that, okay, if you want all these big high-flying jobs, then you're going to have to prove yourself. And that's when the sort of notion of the superwoman and the super mum was invented. It was like this expectation of us that that if you want it all, you have to do it all. And I think we still carry a little bit of that with us, that we expect ourselves to be the superwomen. And I think Kate's right. A lot of the head work and emotional work in families is still part of our cultural norms, that women carry that. So that superwoman myth about the woman who can do everything is sometimes like shackles on us. And I think it's more now we should be asking the question, particularly when I think our value in the workplace as women has changed, that we are actually ask, how can the workplace support me as a woman, not me be a superwoman?
Yeah, I think it's a terrific point. And I think we as women also have roles either as directors or executives or senior managers to push those questions along to, and to say, what would we need to do to make this more palatable for those women to start to move out of that rump that sits in the centre and to start to free up that. Thank you. I mean, it was terrific hearing from you both.
Terrific, thank you. And I'm just looking at the time. Can I suggest we do 1 minute with Joe Murdoch, who I saw, Joe, you had your hand up, and 1 minute from, if I can selectively choose one of the questions from the chat, and thank you. And then Leanne, that'll leave only 2 or 3 minutes for a really quick wrap. So Joe, over to you, if we can make it a speed question,
yes,
speed answer.
Thank you. Actually, it was just a comment to say that North East Water, so I'm the Managing Director of North East Water, we've actually introduced RDOs for Managing Director and Executive. So the board introduced that before my time, and it's absolutely fabulous because it's like a circuit breaker. You can take the RDO and just recharge your batteries, and that's something that I've never experienced in an executive role before. And I just want to say it's a really great example, and I'm not sure if you've heard of that before, Serena or Alana.
No, I hadn't. That's a great initiative for the board to brought in. I'm sure they're very appreciative of that flexibility. That's great.
Yeah, Joe, that's the sort of structural change that I was talking about. So thumbs up to you.
Yeah, RDOs to value all the additional time that executives and managers put in. Thank you.
Fabulous. And Serena, 30 seconds. How do you and Beth handle board papers and board meetings? Was one of the questions coming through from the chat.
Good question. We have our commission meetings on Wednesdays when we're both there, so we both attend them. We kind of divide and conquer on the papers that we review from our teams and put up, but of course we're both across all of our big corporate documents. And then we, jointly do our performance with the commission as well. We'll talk about what we're aspiring to individually and collectively together. So we really do it extremely collaboratively.
Fabulous, thank you. And just as I'm handing to Leanne for our key takeaways and insights, I might also, Serena, I reckon you've also spotted in terms of that cultural support for men to be working flexibly. I think that might be something that our WWDN Allies initiative might be able to pick up and add some energy into for that cultural, structural consideration as well. So Leanne, over to you thank you for kind of taking a compressed takeaway and thank yous as well. Over to you.
Absolutely. Look, that was just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Alana and Serena. Alana, you truly are a pioneer in feminism. So thank you for all your work that you've done over so many years and for making yourself available to speak to us today. There's always so much wisdom in what you have to say. And Serena, a big thank you too. I heard you speak a few years back when you and Beth had only worked together. And since then, you know, 5 years in, you really are a model of success, and you've demonstrated that with multiple people and highlighted the benefits, not just for women, but for society, the organisation and balance. You referred to yourself as stubborn. I think you're resilient.
Thanks.
I admire your tenacity to actually make that happen and be such a model for success. So look, many of us will take key takeaways from that. Given time, I won't go into those. The good thing is that this is a recording, so thanks to Serena and Alana for making that happen. So this will actually be available for the water and CMA sector leadership teams to actually review if people want to take more from this, which is wonderful. I will do a big shout out to the Allies program that Women in Water Director Network operates. And, you know, if any of the men on the boards that you're involved in have not yet signed up, you know, please do encourage them to do so. I think Dennis Flett is a really great example of what some of the Allies can actually do to enable these types of opportunities for women in our sector. So Nicola and I and Tanya were inspired, you know, by these co-leading opportunities, and you know, thank you to Tanya and the Women in Water Network for giving Nicola and I the opportunity to co-chair this. We've got big shoes to fill, and Nicola half joked the other day that it takes 2 chairs to fill the roles of our predecessors, but we're really looking forward to it and encourage everyone to continue to support these events, and we'll have more information coming out on those soon. And a big thank you to Tara, who's on this call. She's been behind all this and done a ton of work to actually make it all happen and come together. So thank you, Tara, and thank you to the Vic Water for all that they do to support our network. And just a reminder that there is that survey too. It would be terrific if people can fill in that survey, because that helps our network to continue to bring great events. So thanks very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing you all at the next event and continuing to support women in leadership.
Thanks. And the survey's in the chat. Thanks all. Thanks, Leanne.
everyone.
That was great. Thank you.